All right, let's jump right in. We talk a lot about the modern workplace, right? All this jargon about agility, well-being, RSC. But what if, under all that shiny new paint, the engine driving the whole thing is actually an antique? So here's this really provocative idea we're going to dig into. Is the French corporate world secretly stuck in a time warp? This is the core thesis from our source material. The French company is a 19th century relic, with paid leave as our only escape. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. The only thing separating today's office worker from a factory hand during the Industrial Revolution is a vacation. That's a pretty shocking statement, so let's unpack it.
So is this just, being dramatic for the sake of it, or does it point to something real? Something maybe we even feel in our day-to-day work lives but can't quite put a finger on? That's the question we're going to explore.
And that brings us to the central paradox here. On one hand, companies today speak the language of innovation, of empowerment, of social responsibility. But on the other hand, the core power dynamics, the actual relationship between you and your boss, it feels weirdly old. It's like it's rooted in a mindset from the industrial age that, for whatever reason, just refuses to die. So the argument from our source is that this 19th century structure is really held up by three main pillars, and we're going to break down each one. First, this myth that we're truly autonomous. Second, the fact that a factory mentality is still alive and well. And third, the intense pressure to just fit in.
Let's start with that first pillar, the illusion of autonomy. This one gets right to the heart of the relationship between an employer and an employee. We're constantly told we're partners in some great mission, but are we really?
Okay, so to really get this, you have to understand this key legal idea in French labor law called the lien de subordination. It's literally a direct hangover from the 19th century. It was designed for that massive power imbalance between a factory owner and a worker. And it basically says this: the boss has the right to give you orders, check up on your work, and punish you if you don't do it their way. Sound familiar at all?
And this slide just perfectly nails the problem. Back then, the deal was simple. They wanted your hands, your time, and your obedience. Simple. But today? Today they want so much more. They want your creativity, your passion, your full emotional buy-in. They want you to be an intrapreneur. But look at the bottom line there. The underlying power structure, that legal right to command and control you, that hasn't changed one single bit. And that is the absolute core of the illusion of autonomy.
So how does this old school power dynamic actually pop up today? Well, we see it in this whole partnership myth we just talked about. We see it in the obsession with presenteeism, basically just being seen to be working. And we for sure see it in a disciplinary power that is almost always completely one side. Let's talk about presenteeism for a second. You know what I'm talking about, right? It's this whole idea that your value is measured by the hours your chair is warm, not by the actual work you get done. And now, with remote work, it's just shape-shifted into digital surveillance. Tracking your logins, your mouse clicks, your little green online status light. It's really just a 21st century version of the factory foreman walking the floor to make sure nobody's slacking off. And what it really reveals is a deep lack of trust.
All right, that brings us to our second big pillar, which builds right on top of this idea of control. This one's about how the work itself is organized. The argument here is that a 19th century theory, Taylorism, is still secretly running the show in our modern knowledge-based jobs. So what on earth is Taylorism? Well, think of it like this. It was a management theory designed to squeeze every last drop of efficiency out of a factory. The basic idea is to create a super rigid separation between the thinkers, that's the managers, who design the whole process, and the doers, the workers, who just follow the instructions. It was never, ever meant for a world that runs on ideas, creativity, and collaboration.
And the consequences, honestly, they're devastating. This slide draws a line that is just chilling. In the 19th century, this factory mindset led to physical exhaustion, industrial accidents. Today, when you apply that same exact mindset to brain work, you get mental burnout, chronic stress, and anxiety. So let's be super clear on this, because it's a crucial point. Burnout is not a personal failure. It's the totally predictable, almost inevitable result of trying to run a post-industrial workforce on an industrial-era operating system. And you can see the ghost of Taylorism everywhere, can't you? It's in the obsession with KPIs and endless reporting that completely ignores the actual expertise of the people doing the work. It's in those rigid corporate silos that make working with another team feel like a nightmare. And it's in all that corporate training that feels less about empowering you to think for yourself
and more about teaching you how to follow the process. The big takeaway here is that this factory mindset will always put process over people, and that leads directly to the burnout crisis we're seeing today.
Which brings us to our third and final pillar, the immense cultural pressure to conform. If the first two pillars were about controlling what you do and how you do it, this one's all about controlling who you are when you're at work.
I absolutely love this comparison. In the past, the uniform was physical, right? The blue workwear that made everybody look the same, basically reducing a person down to their job function. Well, today, the uniform is invisible. It's a behavioral code. It's the pressure to have the right personality, the right communication style, to be a good cultural fit. And what this does is, it quietly erases neurodiversity. It erases unique perspectives, all in favor of a comfortable, predictable norm.
And this leads us straight into something called diversity washing. You see companies proudly displaying their diversity charters, but really, they're just treating it like a PR checkbox for the annual report. They might hire a diverse group of people, but then they expect every single one of them to conform to the existing, rigid culture. But real inclusion isn't about letting different people through the door, it's about changing the culture inside so that everyone can benefit from those differences. The takeaway is simple. A culture that values conformity over diversity isn't just unwelcoming, it's uncompetitive.
So, yeah, we've painted a pretty grim picture here of a workplace that's stuck in the past. But wait, it's not the whole story. According to our source, there was one moment, one huge monumental exception that truly broke away from that 19th century model. And it all happened in this one year.
1936.
This was the year paid leave was won. And look, this was so much more than just getting a holiday. It was the very first legal recognition that a worker is not a machine that can just run and run until it breaks. It established the right to rest, the right to a life outside of work. It was the one true decisive break with that 19th century logic of non-stop labor. So where does all of this leave us? Let's try to tie it all together. The big paradox is that the French legal code for workers is actually pretty modern, pretty protective. The problem isn't the law, it's not the code. The problem is the culture. It's the deeply ingrained managerial mindset that just refuses to catch up.
And this slide just lays out that old-school mindset perfectly. It's a model where the boss's authority is sacred and can't be questioned, where trusting your employees to do their job is actually seen as a risk, where control is way more important than empowerment, and where having everyone fit in is valued much more than anyone standing out.
So the real crucial point here is this. Genuine change isn't going to come from new laws or some fancy new software. It's about completely dismantling this patron-father-master mentality in our leaders, this baked-in idea that the boss knows best and the employee's job is to just shut up and obey. It's about finally moving from subordination to real collaboration.
And that leaves us with this final, pretty challenging question. We have the tools, we have the knowledge to build a real 21st century workplace, one that's based on trust and autonomy and genuine inclusion. But the question is, will we ever find the collective will to finally leave the factory floor behind for good? It's something to think about the next time you're sitting in a pointless meeting just trying to keep your online status green.